The first thing Walter Whitmore noticed that morning was the sound of a child laughing in his empty house. It was a strange sound, almost out of place beneath the high ceilings and crystal lights of the mansion where he had spent most of his 78 years. Walter lay in his bed, breathing slowly, one hand resting on the faded photograph of a woman he had loved more than anyone in the world. His doctors had told him there wasn't much time left. He had stopped pretending otherwise. Yet there, just beyond his bedroom door, a little boy was laughing, as if the world were still full of mornings worth waking up for. Walter turned his head toward the sound. Then came a tiny voice. "Mama, can we see the old man?" Walter closed his eyes. No one had called him that in years, and somehow that simple sentence would change the last weeks of his life. Walter Whitmore had once been the kind of man whose name appeared in newspapers beside words like fortune, industry, and success. He had built a chain of hardware stores from a small shop his father left him in Ohio, then expanded across several states. By the time he was 60, he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But wealth had not made his house warmer. It had only made the silence easier to hear. His wife, Evelyn, had been gone for 11 years, and his only son, Daniel, had been gone from his life for almost 7. There had been no funeral between them, no final embrace, no clean ending. Just a slammed door, a bitter sentence, and 2 proud people walking in opposite directions. After Evelyn died, Walter had become difficult. He knew it. He simply didn't know how to become anything else. He stopped attending family dinners. He turned away invitations. He dismissed old friends with polite excuses. Even Christmas became something he endured rather than celebrated. The mansion remained beautifully maintained, but the rooms felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to a life that had already ended. There were polished floors, expensive paintings, fresh flowers, and a dining table long enough to seat 20 people. Most evenings, Walter ate alone at one end. The only person who seemed unaffected by his reputation was Maria Alvarez, the woman who had worked as his housekeeper for nearly 4 years. Maria was 42, practical, patient, and never impressed by money. She had come to America from New Mexico when she was young and had spent most of her life working wherever honest work could be found. She had a gentle way about her, but she wasn't timid. When Walter complained about his coffee, she would simply replace it and say, "Tomorrow, I'll make it stronger. Today, you'll survive." Walter had once stared at her in disbelief. "You're not afraid of me, are you?" Maria had smiled while folding a kitchen towel. "Mr. Whitmore, you're an old man with expensive furniture. That's not the same thing as being frightening." For the first time in months, Walter had laughed. Maria's husband had passed away 3 years earlier after a short illness, leaving her to raise her little boy, Noah. Noah was 3 years old, small for his age, with dark curls that never stayed neatly combed, and a habit of asking questions at exactly the wrong moment. Maria usually left him with her sister while she worked, but during the summer, her sister had taken a temporary job several towns away. Maria had no choice but to bring Noah with her on certain afternoons. Walter had never complained. He pretended not to notice the little red toy truck that sometimes appeared beneath the sofa. He pretended not to hear Noah singing to himself in the hallway. Once, when Maria was carrying groceries into the kitchen, Noah wandered into Walter's study and stared at an old wooden train sitting on a shelf. "Does it work?" he asked. Walter looked up from his papers. "It hasn't worked in 40 years. Why? Because nobody fixed it." Noah thought about that. Maybe somebody should. The boy walked away before Walter could answer. That evening, Walter found himself taking the old train from the shelf. He hadn't touched it since Evelyn was alive. He wiped the dust away with his sleeve and discovered that the wheels still turned. The next afternoon, he placed it on the coffee table. Noah saw it immediately. "You fixed it?" "No," Walter said. "I just remembered how." Noah smiled. "That's almost the same." Walter didn't know why those words stayed with him. Over the next few weeks, Noah became a small presence in the house. He never asked Walter for money. He never cared about the paintings or the cars outside. He cared about ordinary things. He wanted to know why the grandfather clock made a noise every hour. He wanted to know whether Walter had ever seen snow fall on the ocean. He wanted to know why the woman in the photograph smiled with her eyes closed. "That was my wife," Walter told him one afternoon. "What's her name?" "Evelyn." "Where is she?" Walter looked down at the photograph. "She died." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Do you miss her?" Walter swallowed. "Every day." Noah nodded as though Walter had given him an answer he already understood. "My daddy died too." Walter looked at him. "I didn't know that. Mama says he's with God. I don't know where that is." Walter's voice softened. "Neither do I." Noah looked at the photograph again. "Maybe they're friends." Walter had to turn his face away. That night, for the first time in years, Walter ate dinner at the kitchen table instead of the long dining room table. Maria had made chicken soup, fresh bread, and apple slices for Noah. Walter sat across from the boy while Noah dipped a piece of bread into his soup. "You're supposed to eat the soup," Walter said. "I am. You're eating the bread. The bread is touching the soup." Walter stared at him, then shook his head. Maria laughed from the stove. "You two are going to argue about everything, aren't you?" Walter looked at Noah. Apparently, there were moments like that, small and ordinary, that made Walter almost forget what the doctors had said. But his body reminded him soon enough. The fatigue became heavier. He started sleeping through afternoons. His hands shook when he tried to button his shirt. He could no longer walk from one end of the house to the other without stopping. His doctor, Dr. Samuel Green, began making regular visits. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Dr. Green sat beside Walter's bed, with his medical bag resting on the floor. "You know what I need to tell you," he said gently. Walter looked toward the window. "How long?" "It's difficult to say exactly. I don't want a polite answer, Sam." Dr. Green sighed. "Perhaps a few weeks, maybe a little longer, but you need to prepare." Walter nodded. He had expected fear. Instead, he felt tired. "What about my son?" he asked. Dr. Green knew immediately who he meant. "You should call him." Walter stared at the ceiling. "I tried." "When?" "Years ago." "And?" He didn't answer. "Try again." Walter's jaw tightened. He made his choice. Dr. Green leaned forward. "So did you." The words landed harder than Walter expected. After the doctor left, Walter asked Maria to bring him the old address book from his study. She found it beneath a stack of unopened letters. Walter turned the pages slowly until he reached Daniel's name. There it was, Daniel Whitmore. The number was old. Walter stared at it for a long time. Then he closed the book. "I can't," he whispered. Maria stood quietly in the doorway. "You don't have to be brave all at once." Walter looked at her. "What if he hates me? Then at least he'll know you called." Walter said nothing. The next morning, he tried. The number was disconnected. He called an old family lawyer who no longer had Daniel's contact information. He searched through old business files. He found an address from years before, but the house had been sold. Every path seemed closed. For 3 days, Walter searched without telling anyone. Then something happened that he never expected. On a Saturday afternoon, Noah found an envelope on the floor beneath Walter's desk. It had fallen from an old box while Maria was cleaning. Noah picked it up and carried it to Walter. "Is this yours?" Walter looked at the envelope. His name was written on the front in Evelyn's handwriting. He froze. He had not seen that handwriting in 11 years. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single letter. Walter read it once, then again. Then he sat very still. Maria noticed the change in his face. "What is it?" Walter folded the letter carefully. "Something my wife wrote before she died." "Do you want me to leave you alone?" Walter shook his head. "No, I think I've been alone long enough." He handed her the letter. Evelyn had written that she knew Walter and Daniel were hurting each other. She wrote that both men were too proud to admit how much they loved one another. She wrote that Daniel had visited her secretly during her final months and that he had asked whether his father ever talked about him. Walter stopped reading aloud. Maria lowered the letter. He visited her. Walter nodded. He came to the hospital. Yes. And you didn't know? Walter's eyes filled. No. There was more. Evelyn had written that Daniel had wanted to reconcile, but he believed Walter would never forgive him for leaving the family business. She had tried to bring them together, but Walter had refused to speak about Daniel whenever his name came up. At the bottom of the letter, Evelyn had written one sentence that broke something open inside him. She said, "Walter, money can repair a roof, but it cannot repair a silence. Please don't let pride become the last thing your son remembers about you." Walter lowered the letter. For several minutes, he didn't speak. Then he whispered, "She knew." Maria sat beside him. "She knew. You loved him." Walter shook his head. "I should have told him. You still can." But the problem was that Walter didn't know where his son was. That evening, Noah climbed onto the chair beside Walter and watched him stare at Evelyn's photograph. "Are you sad?" "A little." "Do you want my truck?" Walter looked at the little red toy truck in Noah's hand. "Why would I want that?" "Because when I'm sad, I hold it." Walter smiled. "That's very generous." Noah placed the truck in Walter's palm. "Keep it tonight." Walter closed his fingers around it. It was ridiculous, perhaps, that a plastic toy could feel so important, but it did. The next morning, Walter woke before sunrise. He couldn't breathe comfortably. Maria called the doctor. While she was speaking on the phone, Walter looked toward the hallway and saw Noah standing there in his pajamas, holding the doorframe. The boy looked frightened. Walter motioned for him to come closer. Noah climbed onto the edge of the bed. "You okay?" Walter nodded. "I'm just tired." Noah looked at the red truck still sitting on the nightstand. "You can keep it." Walter smiled. "I'll give it back." "When?" Walter hesitated. Soon, Noah seemed satisfied. Then, without warning, the little boy leaned toward him and whispered, "I want you to meet my daddy." Walter's heart seemed to stop for a moment. "Your daddy?" Noah nodded. "Mama has his picture." Maria appeared in the doorway. "Noah," but the boy continued, "He looks like me." Walter looked at Maria. Something in her face had changed. Not fear, recognition. Walter slowly sat up. "Maria," he said, "what is your husband's name?" She didn't answer. "Maria?" Her hands tightened around the phone. "My husband was Daniel." Walter stared at her. The room seemed to grow completely silent. Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel Alvarez," she said softly. "But I never knew his father was Walter Whitmore." Walter looked at the little red truck, then at Noah, then at Maria. For years, he had believed his son had disappeared. He hadn't disappeared. He had been living only a few miles away, building a quiet life under another name, while his father sat in a mansion, believing he had been abandoned. Walter's first reaction wasn't anger, it was shame. He remembered the last argument with Daniel. He remembered shouting that a son who couldn't respect his father's decisions didn't deserve his help. He remembered Daniel standing by the front door, his eyes wet but his voice calm. "You'll regret saying that," Walter had replied. "Go then." Daniel had gone. Walter had always told himself the boy had chosen to leave. Now he understood that he had given him the door. Maria sat down slowly. "I didn't know," she said. "Daniel never spoke much about his father. He told me there was pain, but he didn't want Noah growing up around it." Walter looked at her. "Is Daniel alive?" Maria shook her head. "No." The words were quiet. They didn't need to be loud. Walter closed his eyes. When? 4 years ago. How? He had heart problems. He was 49. Walter pressed his hand against his mouth. 4 years. His son had died 4 years ago, and Walter had spent those 4 years angry at a man who could no longer defend himself. Noah looked between them. "Mama?" Maria wiped her face. "It's okay, sweetheart." Walter reached for the boy's hand. Noah took it. "I'm sorry." Walter whispered. Maria looked at him. For what? Walter's voice broke. For not knowing. Maria didn't blame him. That somehow hurt more. She told him that Daniel had loved his son deeply. He worked long hours repairing commercial buildings and saved every dollar he could. He never spoke badly about Walter in front of Noah. When Noah asked about his grandfather, Daniel always said he was a complicated man who loved deeply but didn't know how to show it. Walter turned his face toward the window. He said that? Maria nodded. Walter began to cry. Not loudly, just tears slipping down his cheeks while his fingers closed around Noah's small hand. Noah leaned against him. Are you crying? Yes. Why? Because I found my grandson. Noah looked confused. You're my grandpa? Walter smiled through his tears. If your mother says it's okay. Noah looked at Maria. She nodded. Noah climbed onto the bed and wrapped his little arms around Walter's neck. Walter held him carefully. For a few seconds, the old mansion didn't feel empty anymore. If that moment touched something in your heart, take a quiet second to give this story a thumbs up. Sometimes the smallest moments remind us of people we still wish we had one more chance to hold. But the reunion wasn't simple. Walter had missed too much. He didn't know Noah's favorite bedtime story. He didn't know how Daniel used to make pancakes. He didn't know which school Noah would attend. He didn't know what Daniel's voice sounded like anymore. And there was another problem. Walter's illness was progressing quickly. Dr. Green told Maria that Walter might have only days, not weeks. That night, Walter asked Maria to sit with him. I don't want to leave him with nothing. You won't. I mean more than money. Maria looked at him. What do you want to give him? Walter glanced at the photograph of Evelyn. The truth. He asked his lawyer to come the next morning. For decades, Walter had built a fortune. He had planned to leave most of it to charities, but now he changed one part of the plan. He wanted a trust established for Noah's education and future, but he made one condition clear: no money until he's old enough to understand what it means. The lawyer nodded. And what about Maria? Walter looked toward the kitchen. She doesn't need to be rewarded for being kind to me. Mr. Whitmore, she should be provided for. Walter thought for a moment. Then make sure she has a home, a modest one, something that belongs to her. Maria objected when she learned about it. I can't accept a house. Walter smiled. You're not accepting a house. You're accepting a roof that doesn't belong to a landlord. I've worked for you, and you've cared for me. Those aren't the same thing. Maria looked down. I don't want Noah growing up thinking money fixes everything. Walter nodded. Neither do I. He pointed to the old red truck on the nightstand. That little thing fixed something money couldn't. Maria smiled. The next day, Walter asked Noah to sit beside him. Do you know what your father wanted most for you? Noah shook his head. To be kind. Was Daddy kind? Yes. Were you kind to Daddy? Walter took a breath. No, not always. Noah looked at him seriously. Did you say sorry? Walter's eyes filled. Not when I should have. Noah thought about this. You can still say it. Walter laughed softly. That's what your father would have said. He began writing letters. One to Noah, one to Maria, one to Daniel, though Daniel would never read it. He wrote about Evelyn's garden. He wrote about Daniel's first bicycle. He wrote about the time Daniel fell into the family swimming pool wearing his school clothes and came out laughing. He wrote about mistakes. He wrote about pride. He wrote about the things he wished he had said. The letter to Noah was the hardest. Walter wrote that being rich had never been the greatest thing he had done. The greatest thing, he said, was learning too late that a person's life was measured by the people who felt safe enough to love them. He wrote that Noah should never confuse silence with strength. Then he placed the little red truck beside the letter. 3 days later, Walter became too weak to leave his bed. Maria brought Noah in. The boy carried a small paper plate with 2 pieces of toast. I made breakfast. Walter smiled. You did? Mama helped. Walter took a bite. It was burned. He chewed carefully. Well? Noah waited. Best toast I've had in years. Maria laughed. You don't have to lie. Walter looked at her. I've eaten in restaurants that cost more than your first car. And this is better. Noah grinned. That afternoon, rain began tapping against the windows. Walter asked Maria to open the curtains. Grey light filled the room. He looked at the photograph of Evelyn. I used to think the end of life would be about everything I didn't accomplish. Maria stood beside him. What do you think now? Walter looked at Noah playing quietly on the floor. I think it's about what you leave inside people. Maria nodded. Walter reached for her hand. Thank you. She squeezed it. You're welcome. He looked at Noah. Come here, young man. Noah climbed onto the bed. Walter handed him the little red truck. You gave this to me. I know. I think it's yours again. Noah accepted it. Then Walter touched the boy's cheek. You remind me of your father. Was Daddy funny? Walter smiled. He was very funny, especially when he was trying not to be. Noah giggled. Walter closed his eyes. For a moment, the room was peaceful. Then he opened them again. Maria? Yes? Don't let him remember me as the old man in the big house. What should he remember? Walter looked at Noah. Tell him I learned. Maria's eyes filled. You can tell him yourself. Walter smiled. I hope I have time. There was one more night. Walter slept most of it. Maria stayed in the chair beside the bed, while Noah slept in the adjoining room. Around 4 in the morning, Walter woke. He heard the old grandfather clock downstairs. 1, 2, 3. He smiled. When morning came, Noah entered carrying his red truck. Walter was awake. Good morning, Grandpa. Walter looked at him. It was the first time Noah had said the word without hesitation. Good morning, Noah. Can we fix the train today? Walter looked toward the shelf. The old wooden train sat there. He smiled. Yes. Noah climbed onto the chair and watched as Walter, with trembling hands, showed him how the little wheels fit together. It took nearly an hour. Walter had to stop several times. But finally, Noah placed the train on the track. It moved. Slowly at first, then around the curve. Noah clapped. Walter laughed. See? Noah looked at him. You remembered. Walter nodded. Yes. A little later, Dr. Green arrived. He spoke privately with Maria. Walter understood. He didn't ask how long. He only asked Maria to bring Noah back. The little boy sat beside him. Walter looked at his grandson for a long time. You know something? What? I've been waiting for you my whole life. Noah frowned. But you didn't know me. Walter smiled. Sometimes people don't know what they're waiting for. Noah leaned against him. I'm glad you know me now. Walter closed his eyes. So am I. His breathing became quieter. Maria sat on the other side of the bed. Walter reached for her hand. He looked at Noah one last time, then toward Evelyn's photograph. I'm coming home, he whispered. The house became very still. There was no dramatic sound, no miracle, just a final breath, gentle enough to sound like someone settling beneath a blanket. Walter Whitmore died with his grandson holding one hand and Maria holding the other. For the first time in decades, he wasn't alone. The funeral was small. There were no politicians, no business leaders, no reporters. There were neighbors, a few old employees, Dr. Green, Maria, and Noah. Noah carried the little red truck in his pocket. Walter's letter was placed in a wooden box, along with Evelyn's photograph and the old family train. Months passed. The mansion was sold, just as Walter had requested. Most of the money went to the charities he had supported quietly for years. The trust for Noah remained untouched. Maria moved into the modest house Walter had arranged for her, though she still insisted on working part-time. I don't know how to sit still, she told the lawyer. He smiled. Neither did Mr. Whitmore. Maria laughed. No, he really didn't. Noah started school that fall. He kept the red truck on his nightstand. Every Sunday, Maria took him to the little cemetery where Daniel was buried. One Sunday, she brought Walter's letter. Noah sat beneath a tree while she read it aloud. The letter wasn't grand. It didn't talk about billions of dollars or business deals. It talked about a father who had been stubborn, a son who had been hurt, a mother who had tried to keep peace, and a little boy who arrived late enough to teach an old man what mattered. At the end, Walter had written that Noah should forgive slowly, love freely, and never wait until tomorrow to say what today deserves to hear. Noah didn't understand every word, but he understood enough. He placed the red truck beside Daniel's grave. Then he picked it up again. "Daddy would want me to keep it," he said. Maria smiled. Yes, he would. Years later, when Noah was old enough to understand the full story, he asked Maria whether she regretted marrying Daniel. She shook her head. Never. Do you think Grandpa regretted everything? Maria thought for a moment. I think he regretted waiting so long. Noah looked at the little red truck. That's different. It is. Noah smiled. By then, the old mansion was gone from their lives, but the wooden train remained. Noah kept it on a shelf in his own home. When his first daughter was born, he placed the train beside her crib. When she was old enough to ask where it came from, he told her about a grandfather who had once lived in a huge house and thought he had everything. What happened? He learned that having everything isn't the same as having someone. His daughter touched the little train. Did he become happy? Noah smiled. For a little while. But I think that little while was enough. And perhaps that was the truth Walter had been searching for all those years. Life doesn't always give us the chance to repair every mistake. Some people leave before the apology arrives. Some doors close before we understand why we should have knocked. There are photographs we wish we had taken, letters we wish we had written sooner, and dinners where we wish we'd stayed another 10 minutes. But sometimes life gives us one small opening, a child walking down a hallway, a burned piece of toast, an old train that still has wheels, a letter hidden in a box, a hand reaching for yours when you thought nobody would. Walter had spent most of his life believing his greatest achievement was the fortune he built. In the end, his greatest gift wasn't the money at all. It was the truth he finally allowed himself to face. He learned that forgiveness isn't always about changing the past. Sometimes it's simply refusing to carry the past into tomorrow. He learned that a house can be enormous and still feel empty. He learned that love doesn't always disappear when people stop speaking. Sometimes it waits quietly, hidden beneath years of pride, hoping someone will finally be brave enough to uncover it. And Noah learned something too. He learned that old people carry stories inside them. Some are beautiful, some are painful, some are unfinished. But every story deserves to be heard with kindness. Years after Walter's death, Noah would sometimes take the old red truck from a drawer and roll it slowly across the kitchen table. His own children would laugh and chase it with their hands. The little wooden train would sit nearby, its paint worn smooth from generations of fingers, and whenever the afternoon light came through the window, Noah would remember the old man in the quiet bedroom, the trembling hands, the photograph of Evelyn, and the words he had heard that morning. "Good morning, Grandpa." It had taken Walter 78 years to understand what mattered. But in the end, he did. If this story reminded you of someone you love, or someone you wish you had one more chance to speak with, you're welcome to share your thoughts in the comments. You never know whose heart might be comforted by something you've lived through. And if stories like this mean something to you, subscribing to the channel helps us keep bringing you gentle stories about family, second chances, and the things that matter when everything else is gone. Thank you for staying with Walter until the end, and if there's someone you love, don't wait for the perfect moment to tell them. Call them while the kettle is still warm. Sit beside them while the afternoon light is still coming through the window. Say the words while you still can. Because in the end, a life isn't remembered by the size of the house, the number in the bank, or the name carved above a door. It's remembered by the hands we held, the meals we shared, the forgiveness we found, and the love we finally learned to speak. And when everything else grows quiet, sometimes one small light is enough to make a house feel like home again.